Hello, everyone, and welcome to Patriot Underground. Today is Saturday, October 16th, 2021. Thank you so much for joining me to discover the truth beneath the surface with me as I drive around on this Saturday morning and share my thoughts with you, the audience. What a blessing it is to have this outlet, this way of communicating with like-minded people. It's just absolutely amazing. The last copy chat I did, of course, I was reflecting on having the 100th episode and how amazing it is to have so many great people have come into my life as a direct result of doing this, and being able to wake up on a Saturday morning after a long week of work and, of course, navigating through the real work, which is navigating through this matrix and trying to piece together information and figure out what's going on. After a long week of that, it really is a wonderful release for me to be able to get into my car and to drive around and to know that I'm not alone and that I'm talking to so many like-minded people out there, thousands of people who are listening to this show and resonating with the message. It's an unbelievable experience, an incredible blessing. And the people that I've met have been the biggest blessing of all, quite frankly. I mean, I haven't met you actually in person, of course, but as I pointed out the other day, you folks out there know me a lot better than a lot of the people in my life. In fact, I think I'm pretty confident that I share more about myself and who I really am, and I'm more honest on this podcast than I am in any other facet of my life because it just flows naturally out of me. I know that I'm talking to people who can hear me, and even though they don't know what I look like, they can see me. They understand who I am, and in a sense, when you write back to me, that's why I always say to folks, I love listening to the comments, because when you write back to me, when you write in the comments, it gives me a way of seeing you as well. And it's an incredible connection. It's just such a profound thing. And I know I don't want to harp on it too much today because I know folks are interested in other topics as well. But my goodness, it's really been hitting me lately how blessed I am to have had this opportunity. And really the message I would send out there to all you like-minded patriots, all these people out there. And I've said this before, but if you're on the fence in any, and this has nothing to do with podcasting. This just happened to be the medium that I was given the opportunity to have, and I was blessed to have. But has to do with any aspect of getting active in this fight, because this still is a fight. And the more people that are active, the more people that get involved, the more people that step up in whatever way they can, the better. So if you're out there and you're like I was, I used to hear similar messages because I've been listening to podcasts for years now. And I would hear the hosts had similar messages to say, listen, get off the sidelines, do something. You'll feel much better about it. You'll feel much better about yourself. You'll be a part of this incredible movement. Stand up and be counted, as Juan O'Savin puts it. I remember hearing that. He did an interview with, I want to say it was a prime minister interview with Juan O'Savin, he was talking about his film, The Called, and but it was in a larger context. He was talking about really all of us who have been called, and if God puts in your heart the desire to do something, then it can't be wrong. It doesn't mean that the path is going to be easy. It doesn't mean that every single avenue that you go down, you're going to find success per se. But if you act upon what's in your heart, I firmly believe what you're doing is God's will, because it's not on your heart for no reason. God put it there because God controls the hearts of his people. And I know all of you out there, you understand that, you know that. That's what brought us together. That's the frequency that brought us together. But getting active in this whole fight and this whole struggle was really the thing that made all the difference in my life. As I've been pointing out more and more lately, that's why I've been so reflective, is just because I recognize the changes that have come about in my own life as a result of doing this. And I urge people to consider, if you're out there and you're still at this point wishing that you were a part of this fight, but you still haven't gotten to a point where you've been able to overcome whatever it is that's holding you back. This would just be a gentle push in the right direction, because based upon my experience, it really is the thing that made all the difference. You know, each of us, we have decisions to make in life. We wake up every single day and we make decisions, and most people out there have absolutely no idea how significant those decisions are. And really, what it comes down to is, are we going to exercise our free will or not? Are we going to actually be human and do what is in our heart, at least to the greatest degree that we can, being trapped inside of this debt prison and this matrix? Or are we just going to conform? And I've always just seen the beauty in the human spirit, the rebellious human spirit that refuses to be caged, that refuses to be kept inside of a box. And I've always had, for me personally, that's always been the way that I would describe my spirit. I mean, I'm a very rebellious person. I always had been throughout my life. I didn't really know what I was rebelling against. I just, figured that I was just a kind of a crazy kid or whatever. But I was always that way. I was always rebelling against this life, this universe. I mean, sure, when I was a kid, that's different. But, as I grew older, I started to recognize that I had this resistance to what this world was trying to force me to do, which was to conform to its system and its various different systems. And in some ways, we don't have any choice. We have to conform because we're born into it. I mean, you don't really, you have to function. You have to have the basic necessities. And not only that, you're human. And you have to go through a process of learning and understanding and coming to terms with your existence. So all of us have to go through this process, but all of us, I believe, I think I'm pretty confident in saying that the people who listen to this show have the same type of fighting spirit against this force, this evil force of trying to get us to conform to what it wants and strip away what we want. Strip away everything in life that makes life worth living. That's what they try to do to us. And they brought us to this point where so many people have such an immense amount of hatred inside of them and rage inside of them. And I'm not going to lie to you folks. I mean, I have, and you've heard it come out on my show. I mean, I have a lot of rage inside of me as well. I mean, some of it has to do with my own personal issues and life, same way everyone else has issues. Some of it has to do with that, but really, I think more of it has to do just with this overall consciousness that I'm trapped inside of a cell, and I'm screaming and I'm fighting and I'm trying to get out. And I know ultimately that I will, but at the same time, I have this weird foot in two worlds existence that I've discussed so many different times, where there are days when I feel very much trapped by this life and this system and everything else. And then there are other days where, I come on and I record and I transcend all of that and I don't feel that way. And I'm completely focused on my faith in the plan. And being human, of course, we have both. I mean, it's just a reality. We're not going to wake up feeling the same way every single day. But it's been an incredible journey to be able to witness this devolution process. And that's really a lot of what I wanted to talk about today. What's happening. And I released a podcast just yesterday talking about all of the different aspects of devolution that we're witnessing, and the increasing evidence that all of this is going to really come to a head in some sort of military pantomime of a military engagement, a war. Juan O'Savin's been hinting at that for quite some time now. And like we've talked about. We see all the military buildups. We see all of the beating of the drum, the war drum, all over the world, especially in the South China Sea. So is this going to be the direction that we go? I think that it's very, very likely, because I think the only way that they're going to be able to provide the necessary cover to be able to go in and take down the grid, to take down all of the satanic sites, to make mass arrests without some sort of civil war breaking out in the process, is, I think, to have it appear as if it's a foreign attack. And so that people, the American people, the ones that are still asleep, of course, who have no idea what's coming, they're just going to think that, China struck Washington, D.C. And they're not going to question what comes next. Whereas if we just wake up one day and all of a sudden the EBS comes on, and the next thing you know, the military's out there making mass arrests and there are tanks on the streets and everything else, under those circumstances, I think it's a lot more likely that people would fight back. They would resist, the people who don't understand what's happening. I mean, I don't know. There certainly, I think, would be much more of a potential for that. To bring out everybody on the left and, all of these brainwashed zombies to create this war, which is exactly what the cabal would have wanted. And the White Hats always knew that that was their plan. So they always had a plan to thwart that. And I think we're going to see that play out relatively soon. I think once it becomes clear that it's actually not what we think it is initially, at least according to what's going to be broadcasted out to the public. In other words, once the public realizes what's really happening and grasps the enormity, and Trump comes back, of course, there's going to be some resistance from groups like Antifa. But, I mean, really, give me a break. They're not going to pose any sort of real threat if the military, the alliance, is prepared and has assets in place, which I'm very, very confident is the case, to be able to deal with these people very, very quickly, very, very swiftly. So I think that's likely that that's going to happen, that we are going to see, regardless of how this plays out, I think we're going to see some very, very, very disturbing things on American soil. And one of the things that I've been talking about, and also I've discussed with my fellow patriots at the roundtable, is the idea that Americans haven't really had to fight for their freedom. And not only that, we really haven't had a war on our soil since the Civil War. And so there's really no consciousness, not to mention the fact that the demographics of this country, I mean, so many people are descended from families that came here after the Civil War anyway. So there's really no collective consciousness in America of what war is really like, and what it's like to have a war on your own soil, and understand the enormity of what that is. And I think that, of course, we experienced 9/11, which at the time everybody believed, well, maybe not everybody, but most people believed was a foreign attack, by these terrorists. And of course, we came to understand eventually that it was an inside job. And yeah, of course, there were foreigners involved, but the reality of the matter is that we know exactly who did it. But other than that, in terms of attacks, we haven't had that. And we haven't had to fight for our freedom. We haven't had to go through a process where everything was really on the line and everything was at stake. And the World War II generation, of course, they had that experience. But I mean, in terms of they had those experiences. I'm not nothing to take nothing, away from the World War II vets. They had that experience overseas, and they had to fight for their freedom. So that generation, they understood and they valued freedom. But since then, something has been obviously very lost in American culture in terms of patriotism, in terms of understanding the sacrifices of those who came before us. Just a general lack of appreciation for everything had slowly invaded our culture. And at first it was like this invasion that started out small, and then eventually that it became pervasive. And everywhere you looked, I mean, it was just poison. And it happened very, very quickly. I mean, it accelerated very quickly. I think you could say that it was happening over a period of decades, of course. But the acceleration of the evil, the acceleration of just the devolution of our culture, really, really, I mean, after post 9/11, in my opinion, just hit a level that was just hyperdrive or something, of sending our culture and our values and everything that's good about this country right off a cliff, and celebrating everything that's evil and dark and twisted and weird and disgusting and creepy. I mean, I remember thinking to myself, like, when did the world become this way? What is happening? What happened to all the good TV shows that used to be on? I mean, sure, I had a different perspective because I was younger, but I mean, come on. What is all this garbage? And the same thing went for music. I mean, sure, I'm a big music lover, so there's always been music out there that I've been in love with, but everything across the board just got really cheapened and downgraded and degraded, in my view. And this all happened very, very fast. And I think that over the last 20 years, we've seen this country really transform right before our eyes in terms of what's portrayed as this country, which I don't believe for a second really is the character of this country. You see, this was always a takeover, using people on the inside, of course, domestic enemies who are allied with foreign enemies. But this has always been an effort to take down the United States from within. And they got really, really close to pulling this off. But that's always what this has been. But the true character of this country is not what's portrayed by Hollywood. It's not what's portrayed certainly by the mainstream media. We know that. I mean, that couldn't be more obvious at this point. That's not the true character of this country. That's not who we really are. I mean, sure, a lot of people out there will watch, certain things for entertainment and whatever. That's not necessarily any kind of reflection on them. But overall, the culture that they're pushing, I mean, it got so extreme. I mean, they were literally pushing, and still are. I mean, this just disgusting shows that are really pedophilia. I mean, just openly marketing this idea of sexualizing children to the public on Netflix and probably other platforms as well. And there are other folks out there who follow pop culture a lot closer than I do. I usually get my information, somewhat secondhand because I really can't stomach it most of the time. But as I've been talking about, we're seeing definite changes in our culture, which is super, super exciting. Because I really think that the pendulum is finally starting to swing in the other direction. I mean, I think we went so far into this abject failure of a society, in terms of being able to uphold truth and common sense and logic. We went so far in that direction that I really believe now I'm feeling the pendulum start to swing in the other direction. It's a very, very slow process, you see. And this is something that I talked about yesterday, which is really the developmental phase of this entire, really, global revolution that we're going to witness. It takes a long time, this developmental phase. But because, of course, the pendulum has to swing all the way in that other direction before it finally gets to the point where it's gone far enough. And it's run out of force, and that there's too much force now pulling it back in the other direction. And when it starts to go back in the other direction, it doesn't necessarily go full steam ahead right off the bat. It takes a little time. But once it starts to go and pick up momentum, well, that's when it becomes that unstoppable force. And I think that's really kind of where we're at. I think we're at that point where we're really at that switching over, where the pendulum's gone so far in that direction that it's now finally hitting. Maybe not quite. We're not quite there yet. But it's finally getting to that point where where people have just had enough. And I mean, of course, we're already there. Don't get me wrong. I'm not suggesting that you're not there, because I know you are. We've all had enough. We've all been ready for months, if not years. But, we have to remember and be mindful that, this involves the entire population of the United States and, of course, the world as well. This is a very big undertaking. And so this phase, I think, is coming to its close. And I think that, heck, I was talking about it yesterday, the Red October, referencing the blood of the people who've gotten the thing in their arm and how it's, it's just horrifying. These bags of blood are black in color. They're clogging up the dialysis machines that are meant to cleanse the blood. The more information that comes out, the worse and more horrifying it gets. And I keep thinking to myself, it's weird in a sense, because there's still so many people around me personally who haven't come up to me yet and said, wow, can you tell me more information, or at least how did you find out about some of these things, and or at least show some sense of curiosity. Even based upon the information that's coming out in the mainstream media, I expected at this point that even people in my life who are completely brainwashed to believe everything that I think is a conspiracy theory, I thought that at this point, even those people would be coming out of the woodwork and saying, wait a second. And unfortunately, in my life, that still has not happened. And, I'm pretty much convinced that, my immediate family and most of my friends, and certainly my coworkers, and all these people are just, there's no hope for them to wake up. And again, I'm not saying there's no hope for people across the board necessarily, because as has been proven, people are waking up every single day. So there definitely is still hope. But in my view, in terms of the people in my life, I don't really see them waking up before the actual alarm goes off. I just don't see it happening. Because so much of this information is leaking out into the mainstream media. It's getting more and more obvious that the white hats definitely have infiltrated. Either they've infiltrated or they've completely taken over, and really are just pulling all the strings like a puppet master behind the scenes, which is more and more what I tend to believe is true about the mainstream media. Biden, every single day, I just posted a video yesterday of him talking about kids again. It gets worse and worse and worse and more creepy in terms of just Biden in general. But the mainstream media, they can't even make Biden not look bad anymore. Everything that Biden does, and it's not really Biden, of course, we understand that. This guy, Arthur Roberts or James Woods, or who knows who's really under there, but that's not the real Joe Biden. Let's Let's just lay it on the table. Anyone who thinks that that's actually Joe Biden, I mean, I got a bridge I can sell you to. And Lord knows I could use the money. I mean, I'll tell you, it couldn't be more obvious. It couldn't be more obvious. This is a spoof. This is a farce that we're watching, a comedy of errors. Except it's not funny. I mean, sometimes it's funny, but overall, it's not. It's horrifying. It's terrible. It's scary. It fills us up with anger and rage. I mean, I'm not trying to minimize it here, but what I'm pointing out is it just gets more and more crazy, and the longer it goes on, and yet there are still people out there who think that this is reality that they're watching on TV. They're that trapped. Their brains are just completely on lock. And I, for one, I've talked about this many times, but I just can't bring myself anymore to try to pick that lock anymore. I've found that, and this is one of the amazing things too, is because everything that I say on my show, I've said to people in my personal life many, many times in many different ways. Maybe not exactly how I communicate with you, the audience, but I mean, in terms of the information, in terms of sharing what I know or what I believe to be true. I mean, I've shared all of this stuff with them. Maybe not all of it. Not some of the really dark stuff. I don't even bring it up because, they'd probably have like an aneurysm or something. But I mean, I've told them all this stuff, and they don't believe a single word of it. They think that I'm crazy. And meanwhile, I have all of these people out here in the audience who not only agree, but they listen to the things that I say, and they have the complete opposite reaction to my heart, to my thoughts, my feelings, as the people that are in my life. And that is, I have to tell you, that's a pretty sobering reality, but it's the truth. I mean, and I'm sure that there are a lot of you out there who can relate. Your husband, your wife, your kids. I've heard from so many different people, whether it be in the comments or whether folks have sent me emails and told me about their life and told me about their story. And we all have the same thing in common, which is we live in this matrix, in essence, feeling like we're alone. I mean, more often than not, that's the message that I get from people, is that they can relate to what I experience. I don't usually hear a lot of people saying, well, my experience was different. I was actually always surrounded by like-minded people who are awake. I hardly ever hear that. It's always the opposite. And maybe that's what God intended, so that we would come together. It's like I've said, the water is taught by thirst thing. We've all been really just. This is like, for me, this is like water in the desert. Being able to communicate with you. And before I started doing this, for me, it was the same thing as it is for you, is listening to podcasts and listening to people provide analysis and commentary. For me, that was like water in the desert. Because everywhere else in my life, I just, I felt as if I was just, I just couldn't believe that nobody else around me had that same thirst for truth. And, as I've been discovering more and more lately, it's gone beyond just this desire and search for truth. As I'm connecting with my audience, I'm realizing now more and more that there was a loneliness there that I didn't know the magnitude of. I mean, I knew it was there to some degree, but I didn't realize the magnitude of it until I started doing this podcast and being able to feel a sense of relief from that. And not only a sense of relief, but a sense of fulfillment. It's been an incredible, incredible transformation of my life. But I do believe that that's always been the purpose of our lives, was to get to this point and to find one another and to come together and to learn from one another, to embrace each other. I think that was always the plan. But what's interesting though is that I didn't realize this and have this different really this different consciousness until very recently. And so I, like everybody else does, for the most part, I just settled into this idea that my life was just going to be this certain way. And there were certain aspects of it that I certainly didn't like. I mean, I'm not unhappy with my life, don't get me wrong. But there were definitely parts of my life that I was very unhappy about, like I describe on my show, in terms of the way that I view myself in relation to the people around me, even the people that I love deeply and that love me. There was that disconnect. And I mean, that's a really big deal, to be able to find a medium, an outlet for this, and to be able to fill that and have these connections. It's just an incredible thing. And I think that this was always the plan, because as bad as things are right now, I think we still have a lot that we're going to see before this is all said and done. And I think it's going to get, I mean, I hate to say it, but I think things are going to get a lot worse before they get better. Always darkest before the dawn. I mean, you can, pick your saying, pick your cliche, whatever you want to call it. But, I think that's the way it's going to be. I don't think we're going to get a free ride through the rest of this thing. I mean, I'd love to, I mentioned the EBS coming on. I mean, every single morning I wake up, I think to myself, and there's a part of me, maybe not in my conscious thought, but there's always a part of me that wonders, is this going to be the day? And of course, up until this point, it hasn't been. But as I've talked about, amidst all that initial disappointment and frustration, we do a little bit of digging, a little bit of research. We start to find out that what we thought was a nothing burger, what we thought was so insignificant, turns out was quite significant after all. And then, of course, we just continue to wait for the next development. But in my point of view, everything is really going in the direction that it should. I think that everything right now is all the pieces are set up. They're getting into their final stages of being set up. All of the information's being tied together. I talked about yesterday this idea of coherency. Taking all of these, because let's face it, I mean, on the one hand, it's great because I never run out of things to talk about. But I mean, on the other hand, I mean, think about all the different categories of information that we know about, that we talk about, that we analyze on this show. All of the different information in so many different categories. All of it, of course, is criminal activity. And that's putting it mildly by the cabal. But it's so pervasive and so far-reaching and so unbelievably complex in terms of how they've hidden it, that it takes a while to be able to create a legal, coherent case to be able to present, and, of course, a case to present to the American people. Because there are still a lot of people out there who are very, very resistant. Even people who are somewhat awake. There are some people out there who are still very resistant to the idea that there is this evil cabal behind the scenes, this satanic cabal that's running the show and has been for thousands of years. And that's really, I've talked about this, that's, I think, always been at the core of the difficulty in terms of making people understand reality, because it sounds so incredibly insane that it couldn't possibly be true. Now, of course, that mentality has been created by the enemy. These people don't even understand the box that they're in. But nevertheless, they don't want to believe that there is this satanic entity that's running the world. And that is going to be a very, very difficult, difficult, that doesn't even begin to describe what it's going to be, road for people to be able to go down and to be able to understand what's been happening. And I do agree that there's still a lot of people out there who are just simply not going to be ready to hear the things that we already know to be true. And one example that just continually pops into mind for me is McDonald's. I mean, who hasn't had a hamburger at McDonald's at one point in their life? I mean, heck, I've had many. Now, I haven't had McDonald's now in quite a long time, as soon as I figured out what was in the food. But I've certainly eaten them. And, there are going to be people who are going to find out that their burgers contain, I think it's something like 25% human remains. I mean, and people are going to hear this and they're going to have just eaten a McDonald's burger earlier that day. And I mean, it's just, when you think about the things that we know, and this is not to give ourselves a pat on the back or anything like that, but when you think about the things that we know, that we've already accepted, and by the way, there's a whole bunch that we don't know about and still have yet to come to terms with because it hasn't been brought into our consciousness yet. But when you think about all the things that we know compared to the general public, that is a vast just chasm right there. There's this huge, huge disconnect between what is the truth and the people who accepted the truth and, the general population. Now that, of course, that gap is being bridged every single day, and we're helping to do it. But there's no denying that when this information comes out, and that's just one example, that there are going to be a lot of people who aren't going to be able to handle it. A question that I've been hearing a lot on interviews recently is, people asking about suicides. Do they think they're going to be, once all this information starts to come out, there are going to be a lot of suicides? I mean, unfortunately, I think there will be. I absolutely do. Not just of the cabal and the people who, maybe are just want to take the easy way out at the end, but I'm talking about of the general public, the people who are going to hear horrors that they couldn't have possibly imagined in their worst nightmares. As they've been walking around, going ever so blissfully along, wearing their mask, and getting their thing that goes in your arm, doing everything that they're told, thinking that they're on the winning team, and all of a sudden they're just going to get absolutely walloped with a reality that's just so massive and so intense and so scary and so disgusting and revolting. I mean, it's just going to be too much for some people. And that's, again, I keep saying this, and I'm going to continue to, because I believe very clearly that our mission as patriots is to help people. Not just to help them awaken and spread the truth, but also to help them understand and to cope with the reality of this horror. Because we have to go. I mean, as much as we want this beautiful new utopia, this incredible new world, either here or on some other planet, wherever it's going to be, as much as we want that, there's no denying that we have to go through this painful process before we get there. And for us, unfortunately, this painful process has been very, very long. But that's also been a blessing, because God's enabled us to slowly digest the truth and slowly come to terms with it and get up to speed so that we could get stronger over time. And we would be able to handle not only the truths, but to be able to carry other people. Like firefighters out of a burning building. I mean, they're going to be people who are going to need our support, folks. And that's putting it mildly. We're going to be like oxygen to these people. And I think that that's an incredible responsibility, but it's also one that I think we really need to remember what we're fighting for and remember what our purpose is in this fight, because there's a reason that we're awake. There's a reason that we were chosen, or that we chose, as Gene says. We don't know all of those answers, but we certainly understand that we are God's elect, people who have had God touch their heart and their spirit and woken them up. There's a divine purpose there. There's definitely a mission that needs to be carried out. And with every passing day, that mission starts to become clearer to me. Because, as I've said, I mean, the more time goes on, the more folks that I connect with and the larger the audience becomes, the more I start to feel not only a sense of joy and excitement, but also a sense of responsibility. That God has given me this platform, but He also wants me to do His work on this platform to the best of my ability. I mean, I recognize I'm human. I fall short every single day. But I'd like to think that I'm a man after God's heart. And despite my frailties, my weaknesses, wherever I fall short, I always try harder the next day to try to hit the mark. And I think that is what it's all about. I think that's what God expects of us. I think there's infinite love there. I feel it. I mean, I feel the Spirit, and it blows me away. It absolutely blows me away. I have this incredible energy that comes over me that is not of this world. And it's something that I've never even experienced before. And so the deeper that we get into this journey together, the more intense those types of feelings become. And it convinces me that the path that I've chosen and that we've chosen together was divinely ordained. And I couldn't be more honored and to be on this journey with all of you. So I really do appreciate everybody listening this morning. I wish that I could talk to you all day, but unfortunately I've got, well, I shouldn't say unfortunately, but I've got other things I've got to get done today and get on with my Saturday. So I'm going to leave you here. Hopefully you enjoyed. Please do me a favor and hit the like button if you haven't subscribed to my multiple platforms that I'm on. Please do so. Again, I'm on Podbean, of course, BitChute, YouTube, and Rumble. And I will be back soon with another video, another podcast, I should say. Hopefully tomorrow. And until then, I will bid you all a wonderful Saturday. God bless everybody. Patriot out.